Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Blockcast with Will and Simon. My host, Will, how are you today?
Hey Simon, I'm doing great. What's today's topic?
Today, mate, we are talking about SUI network, which is basically the next hottest layer one that's being talked about at the moment. From my perspective, what are your thoughts on SUI?
It looks really interesting, Simon. It was started by two former Facebook engineers who worked on Facebook's blockchain, Libra, and later called Diem. And they claim it's the next Ethereum killer, the next Solana, really fast blockchain.
We've always heard the next ETH killer, the next big layer one blockchain, and there's always been a few that come around. Like Aptos was the most recent one that I can recall that came around and had a lot of hype. Is there actually a real decent layer one going on here? What are your thoughts on that?
There's definitely been probably 100 million Ethereum killers, since 2017. So this is definitely another one. It's interesting, and it does have an interesting way on how it solves the whole optimization scaling issue that all blockchains suffer. So all blockchains have the issue of the blockchain trilemma, which is it has to be fast, it has to be secure, and it has to be decentralized. So SUI claim that they have managed to find a way to speed the blockchain while still maintaining speed, security, and decentralization.
So how is SUI solving that then? How are they making it faster and still secure and still decentralized?
It's a really interesting optimization, and the way to understand it is with how normal blockchains audit transactions. It's really important for a blockchain to audit a transaction. If I were to send you ETH, Simon, and then you were to send a bit of ETH to Alice, it's very important that those transactions happen in order, because maybe you might send Alice 20 ETH, but maybe you only have 10 ETH in your wallet. But then if I sent you 10 ETH first, then your balance becomes 20, and then you have enough to send to Alice. Now, the problem is that you might not really be interested in sending Alice 10 ETH. Maybe you want to send her an NFT, right? Now, so if I send you 10 ETH, you'll still need to wait for the entire process to complete for you to receive 10 ETH before you can send your NFT to Alice. And that there is a bottleneck that all blockchains suffer, because all blockchains have just said, let's just order everything. Now, how SUI have solved this is that they've said, all right, if I'm sending you 10 ETH and you're about to send 10 ETH and they're in the same block, SUI have said, well, these two transactions are dependent on each other, so they have to order them. Now, if I'm sending you 10 ETH and you're sending an NFT or something like that to somebody else, those two transactions have nothing to do with each other, and therefore they can happen in parallel. So it's all about joining dependent transactions and ordering them, and for independent transactions, allowing those to happen in parallel.
If I put my ETH Maxi hat on for a second and just sit there and say, that's great, you found a way to be faster, Ethereum has network effects, why would I use SUI over a layer 2 solution on Ethereum?
That's a very good question, Simon. They've got a couple of other things that they claim are better than other blockchains. The language that they use is called Move, and it was the same language that was developed with Facebook when they were working on Libra, Diem. One of the things they're saying is that it's much easier for you to build using Move. It's much more secure, something to do with the language being object-oriented, and it just makes it a little bit easier to code. You really need to get the developers coming, and I guess this is one way they can do it, by making it a little bit easier, a little bit more secure. But I would say that is their biggest use case. And another thing that they do have is lower gas fees. But as you said, layer 2 can solve that on Ethereum.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because at the end of the day, it's developers who make a blockchain work. So layer 1 needs to bring those developers on board in some way, shape, or form. And if it's easier for them to make the protocols and the projects and build what they want to build, then that would entice them to come to SUI over the network effects that Ethereum already have. Is there any known projects that are planning to launch on SUI?
I haven't seen a killer app yet. They've currently launched their testnet for a couple of months, and I know there's developers out there playing around with it. I've gone to their Discord, and you can see them reporting bugs and things like that. So there's definitely people working on it. I haven't really seen any sort of flagship app that's out there. They really need to get exchanges out there. But then one thing that's really encouraging is that they recently raised something to the tune of $300 million in a raise. And how a lot of these projects do is they hold hackathons, they sponsor a lot of upcoming projects. They say, hey, you can either go and build on Ethereum for free, or you can come and just try building on us, and we'll sponsor your project for $20,000, $30,000. So one thing that's really interesting is that they've got that raise, and they can try and use that to pull developers. But it's an uphill task because, like you said, Ethereum has been going for ages. All the liquidity is there, all the apps are there. So this is a challenge that they do have to overcome.
And talking about VCs there, because I guess the most recent experience, again, I'll talk about Aptos, was that was a VC-funded layer one and heavily marketed, heavily promoted. And it did appear that there ended up being just a lot of dumping by these VCs to get their money back. And from what I've seen, the projects, I guess, having a long, slow death. Why would SUI be different to that? What is it that they've raised money from, and who's raised the money? Who's given them the money to actually go ahead?
Yeah, I think more importantly than who, like you mentioned, Simon, is the whole dumping. And we'll include a link to the tokenomics. They've released that, and they've released the emission rates. That's super important. The other really important thing to look at is exactly what the token is used for, because you want it to be an economic sink. Some projects come out and all they do is essentially just emit tokens. This one is a proof of stake blockchain, so that's kind of nice in that you can delegate your tokens to be staked. And then the other thing is that, of course, the token is used for fees as well. So those are two good use cases for the token. But mind you, one thing, like you said, we need to be cognizant about is what the investors are going to do. They're obviously incentivized to dump, especially depending on how they see the project continuing. And so I think a good assumption to make is that when you look at the release schedule of the tokens, it's best to just assume that those tokens are going to be sold at that point. I think it's best to have that assumption and then kind of like work things through.
Absolutely. I mean, I know there are websites out there that literally track when tokens are being unlocked for developers or founders, and marking people's calendars when there's a potential dump on these coins. Oh, yeah. Let's get back onto SUI though, and I know you mentioned it before. I know it's a big thing that they're pushing. Is they're basically calling it near zero fees. Like each transaction on SUI costs fractions of cents. Mm-hmm. How is that possible? How is that maintainable if the network is incredibly successful? Because on Ethereum, we know gas prices went up a lot because it was an incredibly successful blockchain and it was getting very busy. How is SUI solving that problem by saying no matter what, it's going to be cheap transactions?
The key difference, there's a couple of them, but then the key difference is their whole scaling mechanism. The reason gas fees get expensive on Ethereum is that when Ethereum is busy, you're all competing to get your transaction on the same block so that it can be processed faster. This ends up being a bidding war, and that's what actually pushes the gas price up. Now, the interesting thing about SUI is that it's actually able to expand, because if I'm sending you, let's say, Ethereum, and you're sending somebody else NFTs, and somebody is doing another different transaction, SUI's blockchain can actually scale horizontally in that the number of computers processing it you can add the number of computers processing all of these transactions in parallel, so everything can actually go at the same time. They're not necessarily limited by what you call vertical scaling, which you're just trying to pack everything into one block. They can actually scale horizontally and assuming that the transactions are different. Now, of course, if everybody is sending the same token at the same time, then that is going to have to be ordered, and then that could be a problem. I think in that case, you would need to somehow bid or at least wait. But then they do claim that the gas fees are predictable and they hardly fluctuate. But let's be honest, they've only been on testnet. We haven't seen this thing being put under stress as Ethereum has been. So this is just what they claim. But then they claim that their blockchain can scale horizontally without needing to bid for space in one block.
Yeah, I guess that's the big point of difference between SUI network and I guess Solana network, which is very much so the monolithic blockchain, and they need to pack everything in that one space to be able to transact, and so they have to build bigger to be able to do more transactions. So it's an interesting thing. I'll have to take your word on that technicals because I don't understand that entirely. But if they've found solutions to that, and it's a big point that they're claiming, that's very interesting to know. Let's talk about layer ones in general. It's often talked about is how many layer ones do we need? SUI is another one coming to a space that's kind of already filled. We've obviously got Ethereum being the biggest smart contract blockchain. Solana has definitely put its hand up as being the second biggest. Cardano is still hanging around. We've got all sorts of ones out there. Do we need more?
Oh my God, that is such a good point. And I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, but I really feel at this point, it's really the monetization that's driving a lot of these chains. I mean, I would really love to see an Ethereum kill. I think that would be amazing, you know, and they don't have to destroy Ethereum. They just have to be better, faster. So it's nice to see all of this innovation. And honestly, what's cool is that even with SUI coming out, and if this whole new thing of theirs comes that revolutionizes ordering, there's nothing that stops Ethereum or Solana trying to see, well, maybe in the next 2 years or something like that, maybe they can implement that new technology on their side. So long story short, I personally don't think that we need another blockchain, but I'm really excited that there's all of these people trying to make some money, but also coming up with new inventions.
Yeah, my thoughts on it are that we do not need as many layer ones as we have, but we have been experimenting, and crypto is all about experimenting and trying to figure out the best ways to do things. And we are at a point now where we've obviously had Ethereum very successful. I think Solana is still going to come back and be very successful. So we have two very separate chains which are starting to dominate. Do we need a third in the space or a fourth in the space? Potentially, but they may need to be a bit more niche or built around a specific niche.
Mm.
Whether that's possible, whether they need to be a cover everything kind of blockchain, I don't know.
Mm.
But I think there's probably, you know, still some space for some innovation, but they're late to the game now. So the network effects of Ethereum are too big. And even if something does end up being bigger than Ethereum, it's very hard to see Ethereum not being there in the future because of just how much has been developed on it. So anybody who comes up with a better, faster, amazing blockchain now has to be significantly better. It needs to be a step above what Ethereum is doing to create that network effect and steal some of that thunder. So just being better is not enough anymore. You need to be a game-changing better to take away the thunder from Ethereum at this point in time. So can you invest in SUI yet? Is there a token available?
They haven't launched the token yet. They're actually on testnet, and the mainnet is still pending, and they're doing all of these bug tests and improvements. If you go to their GitHub, you can see they're making changes. So they're extremely active. Now, there's nothing we can invest in right now. And I think this is one of the tokens that we really want to watch and see the best time. If they end up launching in the bull market at the height of it, it honestly might be safer to just hold back, let everybody buy it up because that's what's going to happen, and then let the market crash because that is inevitably what's going to happen, and then pick those up. So I think it's really about timing. So if they launch it very soon when we're still early and the bull hasn't really taken off, I might be tempted to grab a little bit. But then if they launch it at the height of the bull market, I would personally hold back and let the token come out, let it go up, let it crash as happens, and then just pick it up on the way down.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of the cycle to see whether something's actually going to be here for a long time. Ethereum has had its bull, bear, and another bull. So it has stood the test of time. Solana is now on that brink of that. It had a huge bull market. It had a massive, massive bear. Can it pull itself back out again? If it does and it's still around, then I think it's past that test and it will be around. So SUI has many more years to go to prove it's actually a network that's going to still stick around.
And that's it. And a lot of these projects, when they come out, it's really easy to get FOMO. But honestly, I think a nice rule of thumb is bear, buy, bull, hold back or sell. That's the rule I personally use.
Absolutely, mate. All right, Will. Well, thanks for your time again, mate.
All right. Thank you, Simon. Until next time.